Lately, there's been this odd feeling in the air, and I think you might know exactly what I mean, even if it's hard to put a tidy label on it. Because it isn't exactly burnout, it isn't exactly anxiety, and it isn't quite loneliness either. It's something quieter, more like a steady, low grade unease, like modern life is quietly interfering with our ability to actually be here, to be present. Not just getting through the day, not just staying busy, not just keeping up, but feeling alive inside our own lives, present in the room we're actually standing in. Not just getting through the day, not just staying busy, and not just keeping up, but feeling alive inside our own lives, present in the room that we're actually standing in, capable of deep attention, reflection, stillness, real connection. By any historical measure, we're living inside the most advanced, efficient civilization human beings have ever built. We can speak instantly across oceans, access nearly the sum of human knowledge from a device in our pocket. We automate chores that used to take all day, and we can stream endless entertainment. We optimize almost every corner of life now: sleep, diets, steps, heart rates. And in our house, we even have an automated litter box that tracks data and generates charts about our cats. Apparently, that's where the grand arc of human progress decided to go. But honestly, that little machine captures something telling about the world we've built, because modern systems seem increasingly uncomfortable with anything they can't measure, anything invisible, anything left alone in the quiet. Everything has to become data, tracked, quantified, optimized, even the cat. And once you start looking at the world that way, it's a very short step to looking in the mirror and seeing yourself the same way. And yet, despite all this capability, so many people feel worn out, fragmented, overstimulated, restless, like their own minds don't fully belong to them anymore. What's hard about moments like these is that we usually don't recognize a cultural shift while we're living inside it. We don't experience it as this neat theory. We experience it as a kind of atmosphere. It's a weight, a confusion. We feel the weather changing long before we can explain the storm that's coming. And that's what this podcast is. It's an attempt for me to name something millions of us already feel, but haven't quite articulated. The sense that beneath the surface of all our modern convenience, something important is happening to the human experience itself. Before I go any further, I should tell you where I'm coming from. I was born in the 1970s. I grew up during the 1980s and 90s, so I really watched the technological transformation of everyday life happen in real time. I'm old enough to remember life before everything was constantly plugged in, before smartphones, before social media. I remember when you had to wait a whole week to see the next episode of a show you loved. I remember when we could only pick up PBS in the summertime because that's the only channel my grandmother's antenna picked up. Now I stream PBS flawlessly on a tablet, and honestly, I really enjoy it now, and I enjoy the convenience. But back then, boredom or silence or really uncertainty wasn't instantly interrupted by a device. And then I watched the digital tide come in, slowly at first and then all at once. My very first job in technology was with a dial-up internet provider, back when getting online still felt almost magical. You had to listen to it happen. The modem sound, which, if you're younger, basically sounded like two fax machines having a panic attack. But beneath the static, there was this genuine sense that something enormous was beginning. And for a long time, I truly believed this technology was going to make human life better in ways that we could barely imagine. So I became part of that world. I spent decades working in IT, consulting, systems and network administration, management, building the infrastructure of the digital age, helping organizations adapt to a world made of zeros and ones. And I don't look back on those years with any bitterness. A tremendous amount of good came from that era, some genuinely remarkable things. But somewhere along the way, something began to feel wrong. Not suddenly, not dramatically, more like a slow, heavy accumulation of unease. Early in my career, we evaluated technology by a pretty simple standard. Did it help a human being accomplish something? Did it solve a real problem? Did it make honest work a little bit easier? Did it help people communicate more efficiently? But gradually the language changed. The incentives changed. The metrics changed. The conversation stopped being about whether a tool genuinely served someone, and it started being about engagement, retention, clicks, time on platform. Basically, how to keep a human being inside a digital system just a few seconds longer. And at some point, without anyone ever even announcing it, human attention itself became the product. Not just our labor, not just our money, our awareness, our focus, our interior lives. And I think that shift changed far more than we realize. Because once human attention becomes economically valuable at a massive scale, entire industries emerge to capture it, to shape it, to interrupt it, to monetize it. Sometimes I wonder if one of the hidden costs of modern life is that fewer and fewer of our experiences arrive unfiltered. Everything passes through screens, platforms, algorithms, metrics, performance, commentary. The quiet moments disappear. The empty spaces get filled in. Boredom gets erased. And modern life quietly occupies nearly every corner of human attention. Now, just so I'm clear, I'm not saying this as someone standing outside of modern life. I use technology. I benefit from it. I'm using it right now. I helped build parts of this world just like a lot of people did. And yes, there is an irony in talking about distraction on a podcast delivered through a smartphone. But we're all swimming in the same lake here. By 2018, I was downsized, and by 2020, I had walked away from technology entirely, at least professionally. And I've spent the years since trying to understand what exactly felt so wrong. Not as an academic writing a textbook, not as an expert claiming any superior authority, and definitely not as someone pretending to have final answers. I really only claim expertise in one basic thing: paying attention to how all this feels, how modern life feels, how people feel, how I feel. So maybe this podcast is just me thinking out loud, carefully, because even if nobody ever listened, it would still feel worth doing to me, just to slow down and look at the world honestly for a minute. And if I'm being fully honest, I think I'm doing this for myself and for my daughter as much as anyone else. Because I want to understand what kind of world we're handing to the generation growing up now. What kind of environments shape them? What kind of lives become normal to them? And can human beings stay grounded inside systems that become more immersive every single year? Now, I don't think the problem is simply technology or any one ideology or political party or those people over there. Human beings have always struggled with distraction, temptation, vanity, tribalism, power, escapism. These are all ancient problems. But modern systems amplify those tendencies at a scale history has never seen. And more, the systems surrounding us aren't just serving human life, they're shaping human attention and emotion and desire and identity and behavior continuously. I noticed something recently. I was standing in line at the gas station, and every single person in line was looking straight down at a screen of some kind, including me. Nobody was angry or upset, or nobody was even especially impatient. It just felt like we had collectively lost the ability to simply stand there and wait. And I think we feel this in 100 little ways: when sentences become uncomfortable, when stillness feels impossible, when every idle moment gets filled automatically, standing in a line, waiting at a stoplight, riding an elevator for 10 seconds. It's like a brief gap in stimulation now feels almost unnatural, like stepping from a dim room directly into bright sunlight. We feel it when we compulsively reach for the phone, when we struggle to read deeply, when conversation starts to feel like performance, when outrage becomes the background weather of the day. The thunder is always there, quietly booming behind everything else. And then there's that strange moment that I think many of us recognize now, where you realize you've spent hours connected to people online in various ways, and you somehow still feel profoundly disconnected. Maybe that's because connection and proximity aren't the same thing. Information and wisdom aren't the same thing. Visibility and intimacy aren't the same thing. So the central question of this podcast isn't, how do we defeat modernity? It's not, how do we go backwards? And it's definitely not, who should we blame? The real question is, how do we remain fully human inside systems increasingly optimized for distraction, extraction, acceleration, and simulation? And when I say fully human, I don't mean perfect. I mean preserving certain capacities people seem to need in order to flourish. Sustained attention, the ability to experience reality directly, not constantly through screens and performance. Deep relationships, careful thought, moral reflection, the ability to tolerate silence, to experience awe, and to love other people well. To restrain greed, to participate meaningfully in a community, to encounter beauty without immediately converting it into content. These capacities are fragile, and many modern systems sometimes unintentionally and sometimes very intentionally erode them. I was thinking about this the other day while working outside in the yard, how strange it is that some of the moments that feel most grounding now are also the least optimized. Dirt, silence, repetition, the seasons, things modern systems are completely uninterested in, which is why I keep coming back to ordinary life. Because ordinary life may be one of the last places where people remain anchored to reality. Not a glamorous life, not an optimized life, not a constantly visible life, just ordinary life. Meals shared without distraction, long conversations, walking outside without headphones on, knowing your neighbors, reading physical books slowly enough to remember what you read, caring for a place, making things with your hands. I can tell you there's no better feeling than growing tomatoes that somehow produce exactly 17,000 tomatoes all at once. Spending time with people you love without turning the moment into content. Now, I want to be careful because this podcast isn't about building an ideology or a tribe or a movement fueled by enemies. I am not interested in outrage as entertainment. I'm not interested in simplistic explanations for complex problems. And I'm not interested in pretending there was once this mythical golden age where people lived wisely and peacefully. Human history has always involved struggle, confusion, violence, and delusion. Every era of history distorts people somehow. And I think we need more honest, frank conversations about what that means, without turning each other into enemies. Because critique alone isn't enough. In fact, one of the strange features of modern culture is that endless critique can become its own form of passivity. People become excellent at diagnosing problems. I became excellent at diagnosing problems while slowly losing my ability to see the forest for the trees. So this podcast is also about reconstruction, not utopian fantasies or life hack or optimization culture, and not performative self-help, but grounded ways of reclaiming human life, rebuilding attention, rebuilding friendships, rebuilding local community, rebuilding meaningful rhythms, relearning restraint, relearning presence, relearning how to inhabit reality more fully. And small things matter here, human scale things. Because culture isn't shaped only by institutions from above, it's shaped by habits, meals, conversations, your neighborhood, rituals, what we normalize. I remember reading once that attention is the beginning of devotion, and I think there's something really true about that. Whatever we continuously give our attention to eventually shapes us. Which is why I also want this podcast itself to feel different. I don't want this to feel like another influencer competing for your nervous system. There's already enough media designed to keep people emotionally activated, and I don't want to add more noise to that. I think a lot of people, myself included, are exhausted by environments that constantly demand reaction. Maybe what we need more of now are spaces that let people think clearly again. Ideally for me, this becomes a place for slower reflection, for some clarity, for me, and maybe for you too. A place where people can think together without immediately becoming tribes. Because I don't think the task is escaping modern life entirely. That's impossible. The task is learning how to live within modern systems consciously without allowing those systems to completely shape who we become. And maybe small and meaningful ways to begin reclaiming parts of myself, ourselves, that modern systems seem to keep pulling us away from. Before we go, I'd like to leave you with just something small to notice this week. Just an observation. The next time you stop at a convenience store or gas station, look around for 30 seconds before touching your phone. That's it. Take time to notice the lighting, the silence between people, the advertisements, the expressions on faces, even the music playing overhead, the exhaustion, the routine, the strange loneliness of modern public spaces. Because I think many of us move through modern life in a kind of continuous partial awareness. And sometimes I've found simply paying attention clearly, even briefly, can change how reality feels. I genuinely love to hear your thoughts on my thoughts. Honest reflections, experiences, observations, maybe things you've noticed. Because I don't think any of us are trying to solve these questions alone. We know something just doesn't feel right. We're just trying to understand what it means to live well inside a world changing very quickly around us. So if something in this episode connected with you or reminded you of your own story in some way, feel free to reach out or leave a comment. I'd be glad to hear from you. I'm your host, William Carty. See you next time, and thank you for being here. And wherever you are, I hope this episode helped you slow down long enough to notice your own life.